A very good morning to everyone who's joining us for this webinar. We have gone live right now and we're waiting for a few more attendees to join. I can see the number increasing at this time. We have almost 70 people who are online, and we have a few more who are joining us. We already see some questions coming in. So if you can all hear us, I think you can, if you can't hear us, you can just send us a message in the webinar chat. We assume that all of you can see the panelists, see all of us here, and can hear me at this time. So a very good morning. It's a bright Tuesday morning. I'm broadcasting live from Goa amidst the national lockdown in India. It's a pleasure for me to open this webinar today. For those who do not know me, I'm Ashwin Fernandez from QS, and you probably have received an email or two or several in the past for various purposes. I'm representing QS iGauge today, which is India's trusted and independently run evaluation and rating system for colleges and universities. We're excited to collaborate with Academ by REMA 1 to bring to you the series of B-School leadership focused workshops with internationally renowned experts. The workshop today we are hosting is the second in the series of 4 and titled Accreditation and Rankings. The workshop will be moderated by Ben Stevenin. Ben, who is a data management expert with over 10 years of experience in higher education. He's the CEO of REMA 1, which is a software solution provider for the finance and higher education sector. He is also the co-creator of Academ, data management solution to assist business schools with the management of their faculties, research, and accreditation process. I would like to welcome Ben and his great panel we have here. Ben will take the opportunity to introduce the panel and take this forward. But I would like to welcome all of you all and wish you a great workshop webinar today. And Ben will take over and explain the rest of the housekeeping. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you, Ashwin. Good morning, everybody. Well, first of all, thank you for taking part in this webinar. It's a real pleasure speaking with Amy, Nishit, and Daniel this morning. Just one thing before starting, we will take as many questions as possible, but during the webinar, please feel free to shoot your question in the chat, and I'll try to push them on and pass them on to our distinguished speakers. So please feel free. I'll try my hardest to answer them and to push them to the speakers. But if we are missing a few, we will also try to answer them on a media with QS after the meeting. So, well, thank you guys. I will start with Amy. Good morning, Amy. Thank you for being with us today. Amy Memon is from AACSB. She's the person in charge of India for AACSB. And well, thank you. And I will let you introduce AACSB in just a few minutes. I'll just present the other participants, but then you will be on. Nishit Jain, good morning, Nishit. Nishit is in charge of EFMD for India and some other part of the Southeast Asia. I don't remember which one, but I know you have more than India, but you are the main person for India. And Daniel Khan from QS Rankings. So good morning all. And I let you introduce now Amy AACSB to the participants.
Sure. So yeah, and just a quick clarification. So my sort of coverage area for AACSB is not just India, it is Asia Pacific. We have an office in Singapore, so that is my home office, although I'm based in Mumbai, India. And I've been here for about 10 years. So AACSB as an organization is a 104 years old business education association. And we are an accreditor of business schools and accredit about 5% of the business schools in the world, and a very high quality set. About 90% of ranked schools globally are AACSB accredited. So as a member association, we serve business schools and businesses and have 1,700 members, have 1,700 or more members in over about 100 countries and territories, of which 874 of those are accredited educational members. Schools must be a member of AACSB before they are eligible to enter the accreditation process. And once they become a member and to earn AACSB accreditation, schools go through a rigorous process of peer review and are evaluated against standards which are principles-based and have 3 themes: engagement, innovation, and impact. So that's just an overview. We additionally offer a number of services to our members, all with the expectation that they support quality improvement aspects of business education. So that's AACSB. On to...
Thank you, Amy. Quick question, how many members do you have in India?
We have 70 members, 70.
And how many of them are accredited?
14 are accredited and an equal number are in the process.
Okay, thank you very much. Nishit, EFMD?
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Nishit. I represent EFMD for India, neighboring countries, and Southeast Asia. It's a real pleasure to see you all this morning. EFMD, while some of you may know, is one of the most credible and the leading accrediting organization headquartered out of Belgium, in the heart of EU in Brussels. We are present in about over 90 countries with close to about 1,000 schools which are members of the network. But what is important to note, I think, is the fact that while there are some direct members, we impact close to about 14,000 plus schools of management and management disciplinary departments in the business education. Most people know us for accreditation, but you would be glad to know that accreditation is only a third of all the EFMD activities. So while we do accredit business schools, we also are one of the largest and the only competent organization to accredit corporate learning systems. So among the Fortune 500, I would say about 50 plus of those large corporates like Microsoft, IBM, and others are accredited by EFMD under the accreditation called CLIP. And we also are present in the online accreditation, which started close to about 3 years ago. So I think we anticipated what is the situation going to be in the future by digital transformation, and some part of it will be talked through this discussion. I'm glad that we are also accrediting and managing the quality in the online space. And I'll be happy to talk about, as we go further, about different projects and engagements that EFMD has done, both in the online space and the offline space. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishit. And how many schools are in India, if we look at accreditation, are in the process and member?
In India, I would say there are about close to 50 plus schools which are directly part of the member network. There are another, I think, close to a little under a dozen schools which are part of the journey of accreditation at different stages. And I'm confident, given the high quality and the seriousness and the sincerity of the schools in India, we would be, edging forward very quickly.
Thank you, Nishit. Danielle, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I've been working at QS for 13 years. I'm based in Paris, and QS has been ranking universities for over 15 years now. We've been ranking business schools for a bit less than that, but we are now producing over 14 business school rankings, working with over 300 worldwide business schools. They are, today, QS produces the most visited rankings out there and has a team of over 500 employees across the world. So the next ranking we're going to be releasing is very topical, is the online MBA ranking. So we are excited about that in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Daniel. So the format today will be a discussion. So I will start by asking a few questions, and then I will add the question of the audience to the three of you. For the audience, as you have seen, we will not have support. We will not use PDF or PowerPoint today, so it will be purely the beautiful panelists that you will have on screen and no PowerPoint. So we will not be able to share this presentation with you after, but we will be able to answer the questions. So if I may ask, the first questions is, accreditation and rankings are seen as part of the quality ecosystem. Could you please give us your vision of this quality ecosystem and how accreditation and rankings fit into it? Amy?
Sure. So as I see it, quality has two parts. The internal quality improvement aspect and the external recognition of quality, and that's quality assurance. And so each of these products, rankings, and accreditation have a different role to play in QI and QA, and accreditation specifically is much more tied to the business education industry and serves a purpose to push the industry forward in terms of quality improvement, while at the same time serving as a gold standard for quality assurance. So AACSB accreditation is well known for its rigorous peer review process, and that's why AACSB accredited schools are sought after by other accredited schools. They want to do business together. They want to collaborate. They want to develop partnerships with one another, to do joint programs, faculty exchanges, that kind of thing, because there's a mutual recognition of quality of the faculty and students at these institutions on the basis of the fact that they've all gone through that very rigorous peer review process. So that's just a little bit of AAC's, the accreditation aspect of it. Rankings, I think, definitely offer an enhanced visibility to a school in a way that accreditation does not. And so they have that role to play in enhancing the visibility of an institution.
Thank you, Amy.
And I think the criteria of rankings are really designed to help schools to improve the quality of of what they're doing. And I think the earliest rankings are definitely setting a benchmark for business schools to say this is where you want to be and this is what's important to a candidate when choosing a business school. And definitely, the QS ranking methodology, which is centered around reputation, reputation is tested, is tested by quality, and this is where I think rankings play a key part.
Thank you, Daniel.
I would just say that quality is a very hard measure. I mean, not everything in quality can be quantified and put a number around it. While each of these measures, best try to reach a number so that it gives some sort of an indication to where we are and what we intend to do or how we are aligned with the global standards. I'll just give you an example of what we do at EFMD. At EFMD also, when we are accrediting any institution, we are taking strong cognizance of what sort of a ranking or what sort of other measures does the institution have. So there is a strong interdependence between the two aspects. And at the same time, EFMD accreditation is highly qualitative. So it allows us to, look at a series of contours on which we measure that how good and what are the best practices around the world and how good an institution is performing. And it leads to a very consultative process, which allows an institution to progress and enhance quality on each of these parameters. So what I'm trying to say that while accreditation is much more broad-based, looks at a far foresighted and a large number of aspects, rankings view would be relatively limited, but then it's a good reflection of where the institution is.
Thank you, Nishit. I'm going to ask you a question because I have a question from the audience that is related to what you're talking about. Is how different are AACSB and EFMD in comparison to the national accreditation of India when you're looking at an AAC or NBA format? Like when you're talking about quality in India, you first have the national accreditation and then you have the international accreditation. So how do you align? How are you different with those national accreditation?
I would say that our accreditation is very strategic, goal-driven, as opposed to sharp number-driven. So most of the national accreditations would say that, okay, you need to achieve a certain score on each of these parameters. However, when you look at an EFMD accreditation, I would say we have probably just about some 4 to 5 numbers is what we look at. And besides that, what we look at is the overall strategic direction that the institution is taking in order to develop each of the parameters, whether it be around students or faculty or research or executive education, alumni connect. So they're like close to about 10 chapters. That is how we have, divided. But then how good an institution is, how aligned, how synchronous are they in terms of their strategic goals, and are they real? Are they time bound? Are they achievable? Or are they just trying to say things for the sake of it? So it is a much more, I think, hand-holded approach, because through consultation, we are not only just looking and at the benchmarking, but also enabling by giving suggestions how to improve in some of those areas wherein they could do, looking at the global view of that institution.
Nishit, so, sorry, could you also maybe talk a bit about the Higher Education Commission and how is that going to align with EFMD and then AACSB accreditation standards?
So one of the things I think which the new higher education policy, which was pre-COVID, I would say, was aiming was to give a lot of autonomy. I think which is a very stark difference in the last 20 years of following this accreditation. We have realized that you need to be given the freedom to do good, freedom to choose the courses, and need that agility and ability to address the concerns of the corporate in a very short time frame. If we go by the conventional route, I think it is not possible. So I think it's a welcome step in that sense by the new higher education policy to allow institutions of certain repute, ones who have demonstrated credibility over the years, to be given the open flexibility to do new things which are more relevant in the today's context. That is one. And another very important aspect is also that there has been a big shift in the research side. So earlier, the bulk of the public funds were reserved for the public institutions. So now I think there is meritocracy which will be put into this, which will allow both the private and the public schools to compete for the similar grant. And based on the merit, one could also get a sizable or the lion's share of this research fund.
Thank you. Amy?
Yeah, and I think definitely what Nishit said applies to AACSB as well. And in addition to that, I think some of the structural reforms in the policy are going to really help schools in a lot of ways. There might be some pain as they go through that, but I've seen a lot of schools actually leaning on AACSB because we are an institutional accreditor, and think about how to structure their institutions as they go forward for, they will, with this autonomy, they now have the freedom to sort of be as effective as possible, and AACSB standards and align to that aspiration.
Thank you. Danielle, do you want to add something here?
Yeah, I mean,
I think we can align that to the ranking as well, with national and international rankings, as well as national international accreditation. That do you see similarity, quality, purpose, like the methodology?
Sure. I mean, every country has has their own culture, and I think rankings, break down that barrier sometimes when, and it can be sometimes confusing. And we publish rankings by region as well and by country to help that barrier. But yeah, I mean, the accreditation, I think they go hand in hand anyway. And I saw a question there about what should you go for first, the accreditation or the rankings, we use accreditation as a measure of quality before we let a business school into the rankings, because we recognize that rankings can't measure everything, and what rankings, what they try and do is shine a light on excellence, and the accreditation body is definitely do shine a light, and they do have a unique list of business schools, which are quality business schools. And what we want to do is say that some things can't be measured, as Nishit said earlier, in quantitative, it's a qualitative format, and so we try and work with the accreditation bodies to make sure that we are only ranking quality institutions. Yeah.
Well, thank you. A lot of institutions have an office which is going to be accreditation and ranking. So they put the two really hand in hand, and the same person is going to answer the accreditation reports and are going to answer the different surveys of the rankings. For you, what are the similarities between accreditation and ranking? And then, of course, after we will pass on the main difference. But first, let's look at the similarities.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when I'm working with the people in the business school which are in charge of providing the data for rankings, it's usually easier when they are working in the same office as the accreditation person. I mean, there are the similarities are that we're asking for similar data points, which the accreditation bodies are asking for, and we ask for them as well. So I think the similarities are that if the business school has their data organized well, and usually the accreditation bodies have already done this and helped the business school to organize their data in a well-structured format, then when the ranking bodies ask for that data, the business schools are ready for it, and it doesn't cause much more confusion within them. So when business schools are less well organized, sometimes they'll have their data collection person, they would be marketing office, let's say, or in the admissions office, who aren't as well experienced in using data, and then there'll be confusion with the type of questions that we're asking, and the responses that we receive as well.
Thank you. Nishit?
Well, I would just say, the key word about maintaining such an office is focus and the speed. And I'll tell you why. I mean, having a dedicated resource or an office around rankings and accreditation, I think makes your, it's easier for somebody to collect data on a regular basis. I mean, it's not done on an ad hoc basis. So many schools would do some amazing things. I mean, we meet so many schools around the entire geography. And we realize that great things are happening in the school, but there is no mechanism to record those things. So somebody publishes a great paper, it just gets published, and somebody gets to notice, and that's about it. I mean, if there is a dedicated office, I think everything has to go through that, and it makes a very robust process in place, which will eventually help both the school for accreditation, ranking, and even to reflect on their own strengths and weaknesses, that these are the areas we do well, these are the areas we don't do well. So the data analytics, I mean, Ben, you being a data person, would appreciate that how the data can be used for the, betterment of any organization. And the second thing is the speed. Why I said speed. Today, we are in a century wherein everything needs to happen very quickly. So if you really need to address the market demands, I think if you maintain your data well, you can reflect on it, and you can discuss with faculty, and you can create newer programs and address those concerns and skill gaps very rapidly, which in case such an operation is not there, I think you lose on the time, and you'll already have a lot of competition which has already taken the market before you even get into that space. So I think I would rest my case on speed and focus is what will be a very good thing of having somebody dedicated to do this operation.
Thank you, Nishit. Amy?
Yeah, I would just say that, I mean, data-driven decision-making is crucial to any operation, and increasingly so. So both accreditation rankings rely on institutional data to tell the school's story to the rest of the world. And so it makes sense that that's coming out of a central group that is familiar with those data points. And I think that that is kind of the similarity between rankings and accreditation, is that both of these help schools to tell their story, to tell their impact, to tell areas of expertise through a variety of parameters, and they have to measure that, and they have to measure that over time. And so that's why typically we see these together. We also see them combined with international offices, especially in countries where language, the language of instruction is not English. So, and that all fits together as you're trying to tell the world what you're doing as an institution.
Thank you. So what would be the main difference for you between an accreditation and a ranking?
Well, I think Nishit kind of touched on that a little bit. So one of the main things, and I think this also goes with ratings as well, but accreditation is not dependent on the performance of other institutions. So it relates to the individual institution's performance measured by how well they fulfill their mission, their purpose, and in alignment to principle-based standards that are set up to sort of set guardrails around how schools operate, because that's what the global environment has said is of high quality. Whereas what you see with rankings is this, you know, not everyone can be number one, or not everyone, you know, the difference in the parameters all get boiled down into a number, and that can have a different effect. Ratings, on the other hand, do offer that opportunity to be sort of comparable across schools in that respect. So that's one of the main differences. And I think what Nishit said about the holistic approach that accreditation takes. So different schools, we want to recognize diversity in many ways, and that's why we have the mission-based approach. And what that does is, there are almost no preset metrics in accreditation. And so in that sense, we, as accreditation, the reviewers take a holistic look at the school, look at all of the things that they're doing, and determine whether or not those things are leading to high quality outcomes in alignment to their mission.
I would also just add, Ben, that I think rankings and accreditation are both complementarity. There is a very strong correlation between the two. And if we are a ranked institution, and when we are going for accreditation, we look at the type of rankings we have. If you are an accredited institution, and if you are going for some of the international rankings, you would start to look at what are the accreditations. So there is a strong, I think, correlation. And I can tell you that while both are equally important, because I think we have to address the needs of different stakeholders. So while students, when you look at it, I think they are looking at a good number or a good ranking, which is an absolute thing, easy to understand and interpret. At the same time, if the school feels that I want a good ranking and I can do without an accreditation, I think the journey would be far longer, because accreditation allows and enables you to identify some of those key things, which will help you in a way to upskill or to go up on the ranking charts. So I think to that extent, there is a strong correlation between the two. Maybe Daniel can complement.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about stakeholders, you know, I think the candidate, the applicant who's looking to go to business school, he can't compare, he can compare that, you know, a school has AACSB or a school has EFMD, but then to compare more closely, I think rankings, you know, that's when they come into play. Yeah, that's from the outside view. From the inside, where from a school looking to better their performance, I think rankings can also play a part as well. You know, to say that where is my, why is my competitor? Why am I losing applicants to this competitor? You know, what are the rankings telling me about? About our performance internally. So I think, yeah, there's a lot to see about the stakeholders. I do agree that they are complementary rankings, and as mentioned before, I think rankings and accreditation bodies, but you know, it's all to do, you know, what the school is looking. Are they looking to attract a lot of applicants? I think the ranking game is a good road to go down, but well before that, they definitely want to be certified that they are, you know, they are doing the right procedures, they are teaching the right subjects, and you know, the accreditation bodies have a key part there.
Yeah, but if you, as you mentioned, Daniel, earlier, that international accreditation are part of your methodology, and there's other rankings where you have to be or EQUIS or ASPSB accredited to be able to enter. So, sure. Like the fact is that the two are really intertwined, and that's for sure. But like a lot of schools are saying that you have to first enter an accreditation before being able to go to an international ranking. Do you agree with that, Daniel, or do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean the QS rankings make sure that the schools in it are all accredited by the main international accreditation bodies. And again, this, as I said, is a test of quality, and we want to make sure that we are ranking only, you know, quality institutions. I think there are a lot of rankings out there, and unfortunately there are rankings also that you have to pay to play, and this, you know, and sometimes they're very strong in SEO, so it becomes confusing for candidates when they're looking to, you know, when they're looking at rankings, and they you know, they type in Google you know, MBA rankings or what it might be, and they come up with a nice fancy website, but they don't dig deeper into what the, you know, all the efforts of the ranking bodies and, you know, and the business schools are doing to make sure that they surface the right data, they etc. So, you know, I think the industry has to do more to show that there are quality, you know, ranking bodies, or quality accreditation bodies as well, and show that to the, you know, to the outside world. And it's, you know, it's a hard job, I think, because in this day and age, you know, you look at a website and you make your decision quickly. So it's you know, it's a hard job. I think, you know, there is you know, the candidates have to be able to tell, you know, which rankings are really looking seriously at data and working together with business schools to get that quality data.
Thank you. There is a question from the chat that I'm going to shoot at the three of you. Is how can the accreditors, and I would put the rankings as well here, compare standalone private business school approved by AICTE Government of India with conglomerate like IMT, ITM universities? Like, how are each of your like ranking and accreditation are going to be able to play around the fact that they're small standalone with a major corporation, and make sure that they have their own chance, if I translate the question? Amy?
Well, I mean, with accreditation, we don't require any sort of structural model as a foundation. We have a wide variety of schools. If you look at the schools just within India that are accredited, we have the oldest and the youngest IIM. We have, you know, IMT Ghaziabad, and we have TAPME and ISB, all very different in terms of the type of institution that they are and how they are, you know, the sort of governing body that exists for each of those institutions. And we don't really discern quality based on that. We do expect that, and that's why the mission focus of AACSB is so important, because that is what, you know, where you come from, your identity as an institution does impact your mission, and we do expect that. But we do expect that you have that relationship with your governing body that is reflected in your mission. And that is how we deal with that kind of diversity. And we expect diversity. We hope schools are diverse. We want them to be diverse. We want them to serve different constituencies, because that's what makes us strong, is that diversity as an industry.
Amy, if I may just, this is one of the things that we hear a lot, is that accreditation, because you're trying to fit everybody in the same standards, are going to not allow schools to be different and not allow schools to think differently. How do you answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's that is very much, and I don't actually hear that often, because I'm working with schools that are in the process, and I think once they get into the process, they start to realize how they're able to showcase their differences. And actually, I think when I'm working with schools in India, this is something that we really struggle with, because the industry the mindset around Indian institutions is that it should all be kind of cookie cutter and all the same. And actually, we help them bring out those strengths and differences that are within them, and allow them to capitalize once they recognize what their strengths are, and individual to them, that they're able to capitalize on those things, and really recognize, hear their own voice and tell their story. So I think actually what I've seen is the opposite, is that schools coming through the process actually are able to become more distinctive, become more focused on who they are as they go through that process. And we expect schools to do that.
Thank you. Daniel, Nishit?
Well, I would agree with what Ami just said. I mean, that we respect, the differences. In fact, one of the things that we have taken into cognizance is the fact that two schools could be both EQUIS or EPAS, and they are very different in their size, in their impact in terms of the things that they do, even sometimes the courses that they deliver. But then both could be EQUIS schools, both could be EPAS schools. And the difference is, I think we are enabling them highlight and focus on certain areas, certain strength areas, which as a process of accreditation, they are able to, know of better. And if you also, look at some of the examples, particularly in India, I think we need to take into cognizance the context, and we need to also make sure the fact that they are strategically different. So one school may want to be a great school in maybe south of India. Another school may want to say that, okay, I want to be the best school on entrepreneurship. The third school may want to say that I am an excellent school on data analytics. Now, each of these things that we've seen is a result or a consequence of their journey in the accreditation cycle, which wasn't true, because when they launch an institution, they may be launching under the same big brand or the banner, which is an MBA school or a university with a school of management. But then I think through these differences, which are recognized and excelled, I think they are able to make a brand of their own and also get rewarded in the same sense.
Just maybe for the audience, Nishit was talking about EQUIS and EPAS, which are two of the accreditation of EFMD. EQUIS is the institutional accreditation, and EPAS is the program accreditation of EFMD. Well, thank you, Nishit. Daniel, do you?
Yeah, there are other ranking bodies out there that stop at 100. So they say 1 to 100, and what we do is we try and we do go past that, and we rank over 240 MBA programs now. So what we want to do is really to help those smaller programs and shine a light on those, even though they are competing with programs that have over 1,000 MBA students graduating every year, such as the INSEADs and the Harvard Business Schools of the world, and really put them in the same table and adjust our methodology as well, adapt the methodology, that they do stand a chance, and they can compete fairly with the big guns out there.
Well, thank you. So maybe one question here would be for in your mind, and I'm sorry, Daniel, that question might be a bit more harder for you to answer. what are the key challenge for Indian institution when you're talking about accreditation and rankings that you see, Amy, working with Indian schools, Nishit as well, and Danielle, you have an overall vision, but if you could talk about those Indian institutions, what are their main challenges when they're going for accreditation or rankings?
So I think we've talked a little bit about this, but I think one of the a big challenge that I see with schools is understanding the standards in the global context. So they may have their their local or regional understanding of business education, but the standards are written for the global community. And so there is a process of sort of, even though it's in English, but it's a process of translation and understanding the terminology that accreditors use, and then understanding their place in the global context of business schools. And connecting with many schools that go through the process, often say some of the best thing that they did during the process is that they started to connect with global peer institutions through our network, and they start to kind of look at and network amongst that and start to see their institution within that global context and understand where they sit and how they sit. And that's part of that process of developing your strengths and that, but that you are part of this larger global network and not necessarily individual and only domestically focused. Even if that is your focus, you understand what you're doing in that context, and you understand that global industry as well. So that's one of the things I think schools, not necessarily a challenge, but something they overlook. And I think one of the pieces of that is that there's also now more and more, which we're seeing today, is more and more virtual options. So Indian schools have a better opportunity to connect with that global community. And AACSB is launching our first ever virtual international conference at the end of this month. So I think more and more opportunity is there. I think schools just need to take advantage of it.
Thank you, Amy. Nishit?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if you look at the challenge, I think there are two sides to it. I mean, when we interact with a lot of institutions, if we talk about India as a geography, I think when we interact with the bigger institutions and we say, do you have any risk? And we often hear from them, no, we don't see any potential risk as such. But then I think they need to widen the scope, because today, I mean, look at this pandemic. I think this was a risk which needs to be accounted for in the strategic development or the strategic planning of an institution. You can't ignore. I mean, today it's pandemic, tomorrow it's something else. And even the most established institution will be challenged by these things. So we need to be geared up. Also, the other, I think, area of challenge is, I think, the mindset. And I think it's very cultural. Particularly, I think, in India, wherein we want quick results. So accreditation is not a quick result, but it is a result which may take time to, align yourself with. But then eventually, once you get there, you will certainly cherish, and it is there to stay, because it is based on certain strong foundations and sustainable measures which have been taken or put into practice as the journey evolves. And the third area, I think, is also about the fact that we need to be clear on the vision of the institution. That, do you want to do something different, or you want to continue to do what you've been doing? So I think it is something like challenging the status quo, that you are in your comfort zone, you're a great school, you have great number of students coming in, you are always probably having lesser number of places to offer. But then in the end, I think that is not the way to measure the success of an institution, if I would say so. I mean, we will say that it has to go beyond your student recruitment. It has to be far more impactful, meaningful, the reason for your existence and the ability to contribute to the innovative or the entrepreneurship in the industry. Because I think the purpose needs to be far more broad-based, and then you can be, better off as an institution.
Thank you. Dinya, do you want to?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors. One one, the school should question why they want to get involved in the rankings. What's their final objective? Then you can think about how they can meet their expectations, because that's one of the first questions I ask a school when they want to be involved in rankings, especially a smaller institution. Who are they, let's say, competing against? Who are their peer schools? Who do they think they should be? Where they think they should be ranked? And I think even after that, once they are ranked, there's pressure to either maintain that rank or to improve, obviously, and then to say that why is this school doing better than myself, etc. So these are some of the common challenges, and I think especially as I see more and more Indian institutions wanting to be ranked internationally, because there's obviously domestic rankings out there already. I think in the last 2 years, I've doubled the number of Indian business schools that we're working with, and to be honest, they are quite happy. And but whenever I have a new conversation with a business school wanting to be in the ranking, the first questions are, why do you want to be in the ranking? Where do you think you should be, and etc. So I think these are the challenges they face.
Danielle, I'm just going to rebound with a question from the audience, which is like, how do you choose which ranking to go for? How do you define that this ranking is good for my institution or it's a bad one? And how can I be sure of the quality of this ranking, having so many of them on the market?
Sure. So from a business school point of view, I definitely think they have to investigate the ranking organization to make sure that they are honest and transparent. Definitely, transparency is the key word. There are QS, for example, when we release the rankings, we give business schools many pages of information of how they performed, the data we used, etc. So definitely, they should investigate. They should also see which rankings candidates are looking at, which are the popular ones, because obviously, if they want to engage in a ranking which no one is really looking at, then you need to question what the advantages of this. But the main thing I think the rankings are honest, transparent, and work with the business schools, and the methodology is again transparent. So I think this is my main advice, because there's a lot of options out there. So yeah.
Thank you. Some of the questions are also related to the length of the process. So Nishit, you talked a bit about that and saying, look, accreditation is not something that is going to go fast. It's a long process. Ranking might go faster, but that's another. What is the average range for for a school to be accredited? And also there was a few questions about costs, that for small institution, the cost of accreditation might be really, really high. So if you could talk about this costing and the duration of the accreditation process, that would be really interesting.
Sure. I mean, let's look at first the timing. And I think in terms of timing, we are very well positioned, because EFMD accreditation, unlike many of the accreditations, you can't incubate with. So either you get it or you don't. And normally, as defined, it's a 2-year process. From the day you are declared eligible, your clock starts to tick, and within the 2 years, you either get it or you don't. However, in order to reach the stage 1, which is the eligibility, I think that's where the preparation may vary from one school to the other. How ready you are, is the mindset already there on the accreditation? Have you already achieved in terms of some processes in place. So it really depends and can vary anywhere between 1 year to maybe a few years, I may say, or maybe few months. I mean, there was a classic example I can tell you that one institution in India, I mean, did the accreditation entirely from start to end in a little less than a year. So they were very well aligned, they were very well prepared, and they could achieve that. But at the same time, there are institutions which have been around for a while, and they're still, I mean, due to different challenges in their inherent structures, not being able to file for, I mean, moving from one stage to the other. So in a nutshell, I mean, I would just say that it is normally a 2 to 3 year process on an average for an institution of I mean, a reasonable repute, and those who have systems and processes in place and a dedication and are focused on this development. In terms of the cost, now I would change the word cost with the word investment, and that has a very strong connotation, and I'll tell you why. You know, it is like we are again getting trapped in when a student joins in the school, I'm in the business school, they say that what is my cost and what is my return? But they fail to realize that the investment that they are making is the investment for their life. And it's true for an institution also. An investment that they make in accreditation is an investment for their entire journey, for the legacies to follow or centuries to come. Because once you've created a robust process and a benchmarking exercise, I think you continuously upskill and upgrade your entire, I mean, philosophy, and are getting closer and closer to your vision. And having said that, I think the investment is, I mean, way too low. I mean, even I think the smallest to the biggest of the institution, if I were to say, it may not cost anywhere more than about 5 student equivalent fees to about 2 student equivalent fees. Really depends on the institution, but that's my, I mean, assessment of talking to most schools. That imagine that in a class of 120 people, which is the average size of most management schools, if you have invested the cost or the that you've acquired, or the revenue that you've acquired from equivalent of 5-7 students into the accreditation journey, which will allow you to maybe charge even a higher price, attract a better faculty, get a better brand, and obviously a higher ranking. So what's, I think, I mean, why should it be even seen as a cost? I think it's a good investment, as we say.
Thank you, Nishit. Amy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely, the entire process is set up to help schools identify some of the challenges that they're having, some of the things, and most of the time that is taken in the accreditation process is realizing that and then creating a plan and devising strategies to correct it and to close those gaps aligned to the standards. So that it would be why it takes time. It's not because the process itself takes so much longer. The process is, the time it takes is really dependent on the school. So Nishit gave an example of a school that went through very quickly. We do have schools that go through very quickly. Typically, these schools have other accreditations and are already very, very well aligned to accreditation, and then they're able to tell their story quickly. They're able to show progress, show high quality outcomes at an early stage. Those are schools that are able to go through the process very quickly. But actually, a lot of schools, and the majority of schools, use that process for a time of self-discovery and reflection. And that is why it does take time, because you can't solve those issues that you uncover in that process overnight. And so that's really, and that investment, the cost of accreditation, the fees paid to AACSB are very small percentage usually of the overall investment that is spent, because it's as you go through that process, you realize that there are things that you need to strategies and things that you've uncovered that you need to fund, and you need to align your resources to making those improvements, and that's the investment.
And Amy, what are the main challenges that require time from your perspective when you're looking at the accreditation journey?
Yeah, so this is specific to the Indian market. One of the areas that's a challenge for schools here is grounding the research component of the school's mission to facilitate that linkage. And the expectations and activities around it, because traditionally schools in India are moving from a very teaching focused institution to creating and developing a research ecosystem. And so that again is something that, you know, a lot of that time is just spent upgrading faculty to and understanding the research landscape and the costs associated with engaging in the global or even internet research ecosystem. So I think that is an area, and AACSB believes that schools have to have a scholarly approach, and they really believe that research in various forms, not just peer-reviewed journals, but in various forms, does underpin that scholarly approach, and that's why schools will spend a lot of time transitioning from that very teaching-focused with almost no research into a more balanced research and teaching focus, and that takes a lot of time for schools.
Thank you. Nishit, do you want to rebound maybe on the question? No, you're muted, Nishit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just reading through a couple of questions, and you know, one of the things that I really want to, tell schools is to, while they do many things, is to also formulate a digital transformation strategy. I think that is the way forward. That is also a very important contour to reflect and think through within the teams, because it is not just because COVID or no COVID. I think the way you can reach out to a very unique and a diverse set of audience, both on the student side and also on the faculty side, to bring in resources, I think technology will be playing a very significant role. And it is not just about, connecting people. I think there has to be a much deeper dive wherein we have to think through the advantages of why we should do that and why we shouldn't. And at the same time, we need to balance it with certain skills, particularly the soft skills, I think, which is challenging on the online space. So we need to find alternate ways to manage that.
Thank you. Daniel, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, we need the school to first obviously be accredited by one of the major accreditation bodies, but secondly,
could you list them, Daniel? Could you just mention which one you're using?
The three accreditation bodies that we look at are AACSB, EFMD, and AMBA. So these are the three that we've investigated and we respect and we work with. So and these are obviously working with international schools and worldwide. So
could I ask you one more question, Daniel? Sorry.
Yeah. For
iGeorge, which is your Indian ranking, do you use national ranking? And if so, which one? Maybe you're not the good part. Maybe I should. Maybe you don't know, and maybe Ashwin would be more the person to ask that question. But I'm shooting it anyway.
Yeah, I don't have the answer. Maybe Ashwin can reply.
Yes, I'm online. Can you repeat that question again for me, Ben?
Yes, sure. For your Indian national, for your Indian ranking, iGeorge, which ranking are you using? Which national accreditation are you using? Are you using all of them? Or are you just taking a sample, as Daniel just explained, with EFMD, AMBA, and AACSB? Do you sample, or are you using all of them for iGeorge?
So in the accreditation, the category what we have, we are looking at all the three, and also till such time as the current time, we're also looking at the national accreditation from India, which is the NAC accreditation. So we give scores for that. When we are looking at our subject rating methodology, we are going to be looking at specific other categories as well for to consider them for accreditation. So at the moment, besides NAC, which is for India, we're also looking at specifically business schools, all the three of them as well.
Thank you, Ashwin. Sorry, Daniel, I interrupt you.
fine. Yeah, so we then want to make sure that the school has had a graduated class, because we are, one of the factors we're looking at is the return on investment, and we need to make sure that a school has had a class graduate, so that way we can measure the salary. So these are two of the important factors to look at when looking at how long it would take me to get into the ranking. I think the school also has to look at resource, whether they have the resource to collect the information that we're asking for, or other ranking organizations are asking for. And then obviously that resource it's an investment. So it's they need to see what the ROI of working with and submitting data for ranking is, and participating. Yeah, so those are the main factors that I think you have to consider.
Thank you. I'm looking at question as well, and sorry, I lost the one that I wanted to ask you, three of you, so I'll go back to one of my questions. What are for you, because you mentioned it a few times, the best practice that school should put in place? Amy, you mentioned research. That was one of the key aspects. Nishit, I'm sure you could talk about, like, with in EFMD, this internationalization and international background, how schools are going to address that, and this is one of the key challenges, I understand, for a lot of Indian schools. So what are the best practice that schools should start to think of while entering an accreditation or a ranking process?
Okay, go ahead, Amy. Actually, go ahead.
So I think just keeping with there are a number of obviously good practices, but keeping with the sort of theme of this around data, I think one of the really good practices for schools, even if you're not in the accreditation process yet or this kind of thing, is to sort of get your data and systems together so that you are identifying sort of your single source of truth within your organization for the different parameters that we look at. And in AACSB, we don't tell you what those parameters are necessarily. We have very, like I said, intellectual contributions, which is, kind of the overarching term around for research and research activity. But those different parameters start to set up ways that you're measuring those, right? Start to set up and look at what you're looking at. A lot of times schools come into this process and they say that they're supposed to benchmark with their peers, and they look at the data that they have, and the data that they have on that is maybe, the male to female ratio of students. Well, that's a great measure. It's one of many measures that can go into trying to see whether you're achieving your strategic goals. So definitely, I think setting up that data-driven approach is very helpful for schools. But as Nishit has pointed out several times, that is all part and parcel of that strategic mindset, that strategic focus, strategic planning. It starts AACSB with the mission, and everything flows from there. So a really good practice is to think about your strategy, your mission, and then all of the things that you need to do to actually measure whether you're able to achieve that mission. And that is, if you're aligned to that, whatever you're doing, as you go through the process, you'll find that reporting, all of that ease of doing the accreditation comes much better if you're more organized from that aspect.
And Amy, maybe to reinforce one point that you said earlier is, and I talked to a lot of schools that are in the process or are accredited, and they always talk about the value of being able to talk to the accreditation liaison at AACSB or to their mentors, and the way their mentors make them think about their institution and see areas and that they didn't think, like they're looking at their school, they have their own view, but having to align to standards, make them rethink their institution and maybe see strength that they didn't imagine they had. And this is really something that is common in a lot of schools that are through the accreditation process. They think differently of their school, not because they change it, but because they had an other lens to look at their own school.
Yeah, and I think that actually points to a mindset shift, because between sort of what is traditionally done here in India with how AACSB runs with the peer review process, because it is a supportive process, and the type of person that you have coming in and looking at your school, I think sometimes schools get a little bit nervous. They want to present themselves in the best light, but actually one of the transformation that you just mentioned comes from the fact that they get a mentor who is usually a dean or is a dean at an accredited school, who comes in and looks at how they're doing and tells them, you know, some of the things that they're doing wonderfully that they did never even realize that they were doing, or that anybody thought was interesting. So I think that peer review process is extremely important, and the schools, when they start to open themselves up to that, I think actually you're right, get a lot of benefit from it. So that's very true.
Thank you. Nishit?
Yeah, so Ben, thanks for pointing the dimension of internationalization, because I think it is very key, and even more now, because I think in the post-COVID area, I mean, times, this would have a significant impact. I mean, this morning I was hearing to the address by His Excellency, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. And one of the comments he said that, you know, that India is doing fairly well when compared to many of the countries in and around the world. Now, this is a strong remark, because in everything, what we are trying to do, achieve, and say, we are always referring to the international, what's happening globally. And that brings me to say the fact that the importance of globalization, the importance of internationalization is only going to increase and not decrease from here on. I would tell you that we are now in a global solidarity, and global solidarity will enhance the networks. The role of networks will become much more significant, and we need to, I mean, benefit from that. There'll be a lot more exchange of, I mean, good practices of things that are being done in different schools, how they're approaching, I mean, these challenging times, and the challenges are not going to just fade away. I think they are going to come, but also with challenges comes opportunities, and the schools will be very innovative, and they have already started to look at some of the new measures of providing for courses. I'll just share an example of a big shift in the human behavior. So while we all used to traditionally learn in the classroom setting, I think this particular current challenge has led to an opportunity wherein students have a behavioral shift now. They have started to realize that they can also learn through the online means. So the classroom of tomorrow would not merely be just about content. It would be also a lot more emphasis on discussion, because a lot of content will, in my view, shift to the online, wherein the classroom will be a more of a discussion, and the discussion with the use of technology will be a much more global forum. It will not be limited to just what the students who are sitting within the classroom. So I think the future has bright opportunities when you talk about internationalization. Two, I would say that internationalization is not something to be afraid of, rather feel proud of, because what we are trying to say at EFMD, that we want to create an international understanding, an international mindset, and that is not merely into passport counting business, really. I mean, that how many international faculty or students, I think the mindset has to be much more broader. We have to look at what are the global challenges, how we are addressing it, and how our graduates are prepared for some of these challenges. So to that extent, I think the important word of tomorrow would be the global solidarity through networks that one could achieve, and also looking at the new mindset of students who would be much more open to learn through the use of technology. And the last thing that I would also say, that we also have to take into note that what is the classroom of tomorrow. The classroom of tomorrow earlier was something else, but in future would be a lot of, I think, tilted towards the fact that it has to bring new value which is not available on the online place. So that basis that I think the newer courses and the curriculum will be impacted.
Thank you. Dania, do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nishit that the rankings and accreditation are part of the internationalization process for any business school. But to complement what Amy was saying before about accreditation helping schools to find out what they're good at, I think the rankings can also do this, and there's obviously several criteria what we look at when we do a ranking, and perhaps Indian schools are not always the strongest at diversity in terms of the number of nationalities in the class, or the male-female diversity criteria, but they are stronger in other criteria metrics in the rankings, and they can use those to market their programs and to help students to see the stronger points of the business school, which a number doesn't always a number in the ranking doesn't always show, but to say that we are this in terms of we are number one in terms of our ROI or etc. It's important, I think, for a candidate and also for a business school to be proud of. Yeah.
Danielle, quick question on the ranking is, a school that is not in the QS ranking today, they are interested in entering, but they also would like to have a view of where they could be. Do they have a way to kind of like, do a test scenario, like where I could be in the QS? Is there a way to do that, or it's not something possible?
Yeah, I mean, there are factors which they can predict, I suppose, because the information that we use is transparent. I think there's other rankings you can do this as well, so that there are factors you can predict. There are other factors such as the reputational metrics that we use, which are going to be harder to predict. We run a survey of employers, which is responded to by 30,000 plus employers every year, and if the school is not participating, and engaging their employers in that process yet, then it's harder to predict how the employers will be responding. We also run a huge survey of over 90,000 academics as well, so which is looking at it could be classed as a peer review, but it's really an academic reputation index, and some of these are harder to predict. I suppose what I like to do is hold the school's hand and make sure they're not going down the road which they don't want to be, but we try our best to meet expectations before the school participates in the ranking.
Thank you. One question, because you mentioned the COVID-19 crisis, and some of the questions that came up from the audience is COVID going to change something in the accreditation or in the ranking? Like, are you going to modify something in the standards? Are you going to take it easy on some of the aspects of the accreditation because of well, Amy, I'm looking at you, you're smiling. I think AOL could be a good question for you there. So how are your institutions going to play along with this COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, I think, well, for AACSB's part, it has impacted the way that we operate. We do visits, we do, you know, schools have to go through to get initial accreditation, they have to go through an in-person visit. So someone does have to come and physically go for that visit. And so that's impacted some of those things in terms of the logistics of actually operating the accreditation system. And so one of the things that we did with our continuous improvement review, so once you're accredited, you go through a continuous improvement review every 5 years. We now allow those to be virtual in situations like this, and that's been very well regarded by our schools. In terms of the actual standards, you know, again, it's not a prescriptive model. So when a school has to adapt their system to a situation, whether it's assurance of learning, for example, some schools couldn't do their final exams, and therefore some of those points for their AOL were not able to be assessed this year. I mean, that's very much understood. The goal of the principle, so again, getting back to the principle, it's not that you assess learning at a given point in time all the time. The principle of assurance of learning is that you have a systematic process in place to evaluate student learning outcomes. And whether you are doing that in the middle of COVID or you're doing that in a normal year, as long as you are recognizing that that is a continuous system, then a little blip like this doesn't necessarily upset the entire system. And that's what we're evaluating is, do you have that system? Is it functioning, and is it helping you? So again, it's very local decisions when it comes to dealing with COVID, whereas you know, AACSB accreditation is looking at the principle of the matter.
Thank you, Amy. Nishit?
I agree with what Amy said, but in addition, I would say that what EFMD has also started, in addition to some of these things, is address a global challenge which our member schools have faced on employability. And all of you would agree that I think the employability is also very crucial for the cycle of the institution to remain and attract newer students to pursue programs. And the reason I'm saying, because EFMD had a tool called Higher Ed, by virtue of which it was able to provide for opportunities for all the graduates of any institution globally. Now, all of these are transformed online. So we have started to create virtual job fairs, and there are 2 job fairs every so far 2 virtual job fairs have already been conducted by EFMD under the brand called Higher Ed. If you Google it, you will see. And there are another 6 of them aligned. The reason I'm saying that this is going to also be a way in future wherein companies have started to interview these graduates and look at it through the online space, and they have realized that I think it's a great tool. I mean, not all the challenges are seen as challenges, but I think these challenges have led to a new way of assessing and hiring the graduates of the future. So I think that's a very big win for all the business schools to sort of attempt to place their graduates globally through some of the virtual platforms. Additionally, I think what has also another very important impact of this would be, I mean, we foresee that there'll be a change in the pecking order. The traditional schools, which had been heavily dependent, they are excellent schools, I have nothing against them, they are excellent schools, but they have been heavily deployed and very resistant to bringing in technology or the online. I think they will be forced, but at the same time, the reason there'll be change in the pecking order, because the smaller schools, I mean, as I was seeing through some of the questions, that what we could do, how we could differentiate, I think this is the time for you, because in a smaller organization, it's easier to bring in some of the innovative things and bring changes and go online or blended learning or some of the new tools that you could bring on board. And therefore, that could be a game changer for many of the institutions. I'm not so sure how far the rankings will take that into cognizance, but my strong feeling is that the rankings of the future will also play a very significant, importance on how the schools have transformed as opposed to, in the pre-COVID to the post-COVID area, as opposed to the significant impetus that so far has been put on the salaries of the graduates. So I think it is going beyond and looking at a newer way of measuring the success of an institution.
Thank you, Dania.
Yeah, I think in the short term, we have to be careful as a ranking organization if we are going to be measuring a school on their performance last year, which is really the data we have access to, where we measure an institution on their adaptation to the COVID situation, or we measure the school on their, let's say, performance in dealing with the COVID situation and the ranking, i.e., do they do all that's necessary to get in contact with their alumni for the data which we require, etc. Even though the alumni might be doing better or worse. So there's several factors. I think we're early in the day to make a decision. I think any decision will be based on data, data coming from the business schools of how how they feel, how they how they feel in terms of collecting the data. And while I'm doing the most recent data collection, I don't make any strict rules on what on what timelines there will be, but what I want to do is open the door and discuss and collect information and on a weekly basis even to review. In terms of methodology, I agree that a methodology should always be relevant to a candidate looking to go to business school, and if that our current methodology does reflect that. And if that does change, I think the methodology has to change, and we can't be, we can't close our door and eyes to that. So I think it's all about monitoring and using data to make those decisions, and make sure that that whatever decisions we make are fair and justified and complement what the school is really doing to adjust to the situation.
Thank you, Dania. I think Ashwin wanted to give us a vision of what iGeorge is doing.
Yes, thanks so much, Ben, for this. And I think some great points by all the panelists today. I'd like to add a little bit on because I've been working with the ranking scene as well as ratings in the South Asian region for a while now. Thanks to Daniel's support, we have kind of been able to get many more B schools and many more universities to have their programs ranked, as well as the B schools ranked in our rankings. But also what we've seen is a major shift to our evaluation systems, which are both QS stars, which is run globally, as well as the India specific rating system, which is called QS iGauge. Now, I think probably in the future, we'll have a panel like this, which talks of accreditation, rankings, and ratings, because I think that's the new buzzword at the moment. And I think more than rankings at this time, the ratings have been able to capture the dynamism of Indian higher education. When we looked at QS iGauge 2 years ago, and when it was launched, it was supposed to be a global system, looking at global standards and how does those global standards could be adapted to the Indian system, while not lowering them, but also understanding how Indian higher education is different from that in other parts of the world and other parts of the developed world. And that has turned out to be great for us. What we've seen in the last few weeks is that how the COVID-19 situation is taking the world by storm. So what we have developed in the last week is an online e-learning readiness audit for the institutions. So we are moving really fast. And part of this audit, we have two parts of it. And one is a public service we want to do, not just to B schools, but for the entire country, for all the higher education institutions, to offer them a quick check whether they are, whether they have the standards, the minimum standards for going into e-learning. Because we still don't know how long this pandemic will last. all the previous issues we've had in the recent past didn't require social distancing. And this is something very unique where we have to maintain social distancing, and classrooms I don't think will resume so soon. So definitely institutions are going to move online, and they are moving online. So part of what we have done immediately is going to go out there with the e-readiness audit, which is a public service, and also offer institutions and complement them by offering them further e-learning and digital services audit, as well as an e-infrastructure and IT and communication technology audit, which is going to add on to our existing audit what we're doing. Now, with this, we are also looking at, different technologies provided, how do they adapt, what kind of systems are in place, what kind of infrastructure is used, what kind of software, what kind of cloud-based e-learning initiatives. So in probably a week's time, we'll be able to go public with most of this. And I think this will only complement what AACSB is doing as EFMD and ICWIS and AMBA, as well as what global rankings are doing by us supporting and recognizing and giving Indian institutions some kind of path for the future. So I'm very excited with what we're doing. While the situation seems to be grim, I think we are supporting all of us, and I think all of the people here today are definitely supporting and want to see India take this the quality of higher education excellence to another level. So we are happy to be part of the journey, and thank you so much for allowing me to say this few words towards the end.
Well, thank you, Ashwin, and I see the time, so I think this is the end of our webinar this morning. I know that you have one more word to say, Ashwin and Francois, but I will first want to thank our panelists, Amy, Nishit, and Daniel. Thank you so much for the time you took this morning. And now I let the floor to Ashwin and Francois to introduce the third webinar that is coming up soon, if I understand properly.
So I'll let Francois do the honors on this one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben and Ashwin. Yeah, just a few words to first. I saw in the questions that there were questions on trainings for accreditation. So Ben is too modest, but he's organizing, I think, quite soon a series of webinars on quality assurance and aligned with accreditation. So I guess, Ben, that you could extend the invitation to the people who participated to this webinar. I'm sure it would be useful to them. And then, yes, quickly to announce you the third webinar of this series, which will be on Thursday at the same time. I saw a few questions that are related to this webinar. So this webinar will focus specifically on digitalization, internationalization, and entrepreneurship, because there are three topics of importance for many business schools in India, and particularly related to their path toward accreditations and rankings. So we'll have three panelists, Alex from QS, and will be very interesting because Alex will share with us some of the data that they gathered from business schools on these three specific topics. So we'll get some data to support our talks. And then we have Jeremy Williams, who is currently a prof in Zayed University in Dubai, but who has about more than 20 years of experience in online learning. So we'll be able to talk about this topic with an expert. And the last one, but not the least, is a local one that many of you know is Atish, the director of EFIN, who was previously at IMT Ghaziabad and has also lots of experience on these different topics. And we'll take questions as usual, so I'm sure it will be a great webinar. So I invite all of you to come back on Thursday at the same time for this third webinar. Well, thank you.
Just a closing word, we do have a lot more capacity for the webinar because we are anticipating more people joining us. So please share this invitation with your colleagues who are working from home at this time. India is on an extended lockdown, so we have a lockdown till the May 3rd. So you can do what you can do is, as a gift to your colleagues is send them the sign up link to sign them up for the webinars. What we have decided is we were supposed to do a certificate for those attending all the webinars, but we are going to do it on individual basis as well. So those attending the next webinar will get an individual certificate, and then the one attending the next as well will do individual certificates for each one of them to encourage more participation in these times where you're still locked down at home. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you, everyone.
For moderating this. Great stuff.
Yes, thank you, Ben.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.